The rhythmic whir of machinery filled the air as Zach bent over his workbench, his brow furrowed in concentration. The soft glow of the plasma forge illuminated his weathered features, casting shadows across the cluttered workshop. It was a late night, like so many others. Just him, his tools, and the hum of his creations. A sudden, heavy pounding at the door shattered his focus. Zach glanced at the clock, confirming the lateness of the hour. He wasn't expecting any visitors, especially not at this time. Curiosity piqued. He set down his tools and made his way to the entrance. As the heavy metal door swung open, Zach found himself face to face with an imposing figure. She stood tall and proud, her posture exuding a warrior's grace. Iridescent scales covered her skin, catching the dim light and throwing it back in shimmering hues of deep blue and violet. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed upon him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "Are you the one they call Zach?" Her voice was deep and resonant, carrying an undercurrent of authority. Zach nodded slowly, taking in the sight of her. She was clad in an armor unlike any he had seen before, a seamless blend of organic curves and hard metallic edges. A large angular weapon was strapped across her back, its surface etched with intricate, glowing patterns. "I am Syra, of the Keros," she continued, stepping over the threshold uninvited. "I was told you are the best mechanic in this sector." "Well, I don't know about the best," Zach replied, finding his voice, "but I've been known to fix a thing or two. What brings you here?" In response, Al-Hirad slung the weapon from her back and laid it on his workbench with a heavy thud. Up close, Zach could see that it was damaged. Deep gouges marred its surface, and a faint, sputtering glow emanated from its core. "This is the heart of Keros, a weapon of my people," Zyra explained, her hand resting on its surface, almost reverently. "It was forged in the sacred fires of my homeworld, imbued with the spirit of our greatest warriors, and now it is broken." Zach leaned in, his eyes widening as he took in the alien contours of the weapon. He could feel the thrum of power within it, like a heartbeat beneath his fingertips. "I've never seen anything like this," he breathed, equal parts awed and intimidated. "I'm not sure if I can." "You must." Kyra cut in, her voice brooking no argument. "There is no one else. The heart chooses its bearer, and it has chosen me. Without it, I am incomplete. I cannot fulfill my purpose." Zach met her gaze, seeing the fierce determination burning within. He had never backed down from a challenge before, and he wasn't about to start now. Not with so much seemingly at stake. "All right," he said at last, rolling up his sleeves. "I'll do my best, but I can't make any promises." Kyra inclined her head, a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude. "That is all I ask. I will wait." As Zach set to work, his mind raced with questions. What was this weapon, really? What was Kyra's purpose? And what had he just gotten himself into? Little did he know, the answers would change his life forever. The heart of Keros lay open on Zach's workbench, its intricate inner workings exposed under the bright lights. Zach hunched over it, his eyes narrowed in concentration as he carefully examined each component. The technology was unlike anything he had ever encountered, organic and mechanical elements interwoven in a complex dance, pulsing with an energy that seemed almost alive. As he worked, Zach could feel Kyra's presence behind him, a silent sentinel watching his every move. Her gaze was intense, filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "This is incredible," Zach murmured, more to himself than to her. "The level of craftsmanship, the intricacy of the design. I've never seen anything like it." "It is the work of the Forge Masters," Zyra said, her voice tinged with reverence. "In the days of old, they poured their hearts and souls into each weapon, imbuing them with the essence of our people." Zach paused, looking up at her. "The essence? What do you mean?" Zyra stepped closer, her hand coming to rest on the heart. Under her touch, The weapon seemed to pulse more strongly, its glow intensifying. "The heart is not just a tool," she explained. "It is an extension of myself, a part of my very being. When I wield it in battle, we are one. Its strength flows through me, and my will guides its power." Zatch's eyes widened as he looked at the weapon with newfound understanding. He had heard of such bonds before, in the ancient legends of his own people, warriors and their blades, forged together in the heat of battle. But to see it in the flesh, to hold the proof of it in his hands, it was humbling. "I can feel it," he said softly. "The connection between you and the heart. It's incredible." Zaira nodded, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "It is a bond few outsiders can comprehend. You are different, Zach. You see with the eyes of a true craftsman." Her words sent a thrill through him, a sense of connection he had never felt before. In that moment, the gulf between their worlds seemed to narrow, bridged by a shared appreciation for the marvels of technology and the bonds they could forge. Zach turned back to the heart, his determination renewed. He would fix this marvel, not just for Kyra, but for the chance to be a part of something greater, to touch a legacy that spanned the stars. As the night wore on, Zach lost himself in the work, his hands moving with a surety born of years of experience. Piece by piece, the heart came together under his touch, its components realigned and re-energized. And all the while, Zaira watched, her presence a constant reminder of the importance of his task. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the workshop windows, Zach stepped back, wiping the sweat from his brow. The heart lay whole once more, its surface smooth and unblemished, its glow steady and strong. "It is done," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and satisfaction. "The heart of Kairos beats again." Thyra stepped forward, her hand reaching out to caress the weapon's surface. Under her touch, it thrummed, a resonant hum that filled the air. A smile spread across her face, fierce and joyful. "You have done well, Zach," she said, meeting his gaze. "You have earned the gratitude of the Kairos, and my own." In that moment, as the first rays of sunlight glinted off the heart's surface, Zach felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He had been a part of something extraordinary, and his life would never be the same. As the sun rose over the horizon, bathing the workshop in a warm, golden glow, Zach and Sarah found themselves seated at his workbench, the heart of Kairos between them. There was a new understanding in the air, a connection forged through the long hours of the night. "Tell me more about your people," Zach said, his curiosity overwhelming his exhaustion. "About the Forge Masters and the weapons they created." Kyra's gaze grew distant, as if she was looking back through the veil of time. The Kairos were once a mighty civilization, spanning dozens of star systems. Our technology was unrivaled, our warriors legendary. And at the heart of it all were the Forge Masters. She traced a finger along the intricate patterns etched into the heart's surface. They were more than just craftsmen. They were artists, philosophers, visionaries. Each weapon they forged was a masterpiece, imbued with the very essence of our culture. Zach listened, enthralled. He had always been fascinated by the tales of ancient civilizations, the lost knowledge and forgotten wonders. To hear it firsthand, from one who carried that legacy in her very blood, it was a gift beyond measure. "What happened to them?" he asked softly, almost afraid to break the spell of her words. A shadow passed over Xyra's face, a flicker of ancient pain. "War, a conflict unlike any we had ever known. Our enemies sought to destroy not just our people, but our very way of life. The Forge Masters were among the first to fall." She closed her eyes, her grip tightening on the heart. In the end, only a handful of their creations survived, passed down from generation to generation. The heart is one of the last. Zach's heart ached for her, for the weight of history she carried. He couldn't imagine the burden of being the sole guardian of such a legacy. "And now it's yours to wield," he said, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. Zaira nodded, her eyes opening to meet his. It is my duty and my honor. With the heart, I can keep the memory of my people alive. I can fight for what they believed in. Zach's mind raced, pieces falling into place. The damage to the weapon. Syra's desperation to have it repaired. It all made sense now. That's why you came here, isn't it? He asked. You're not just a warrior. You're a guardian, a protector of your people's legacy. Syra's smile was sad, but proud. You see more than most, Zach. Yes, I have sworn my life to this cause. The heart is not just a weapon, it's a symbol. As long as it endures, so too does the spirit of the Keros. Zach felt a swell of emotion, a fierce protectiveness he had never known before. In that moment, he knew he would do anything to help Zyra, to ensure that her people's legacy lived on. Then let me help you, he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Let me be a part of this, in whatever way I can. Kyra's eyes widened, surprise and gratitude warring in their depths. Zach, I cannot ask that of you. This is not your fight. But Zach was already shaking his head, his mind made up. You didn't ask. I'm offering. Your people's story. It deserves to be told. It deserves to be remembered. If I can help with that, even in the smallest way, it would be my honor. For a long moment, Syra was silent, her gaze searching his. Then, slowly, she reached out, her hand coming to rest on his. Then I accept your offer, Zach of Earth. Together, we will ensure that the legacy of the Keros endures, no matter the cost. And in that moment, as the first sounds of the waking city filtered through the workshop walls, a new chapter in both their lives began. A chapter of friendship, of shared purpose, and of a legacy that would echo through the ages. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and red when they came. Zach was just finishing up the final calibrations on the heart when the door to his workshop burst open, the sound of splintering wood and twisting metal filling the air. Zyra was on her feet in an instant, the heart in her hands, its glow pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Zach scrambled to her side, his eyes wide as he took in the sight before them. 3 figures stood in the doorway, their forms silhouetted against the dying light. They were tall and lean, with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed a malevolent red. Each held a weapon that hummed with a sickly, pulsing energy. Sira of the Keros. The leader spoke, his voice a guttural snarl. You have something that belongs to us. Syra's grip tightened on the heart, her stance shifting into one of readiness. The heart belongs to no one but itself, Zorgoth. It chooses its wielder, and it has chosen me. The one called Zorgoth laughed, the sound like the scraping of metal on stone. Then we will pry it from your cold, dead hands. Zach's heart raced, fear and adrenaline surging through his veins. He had never been a fighter, never faced a real threat in his life. But as he looked at Syra, at the fierce determination in her eyes, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. You'll have to go through me first, he said, stepping forward to stand beside Syra. His voice shook, but his resolve was steady. Syra glanced at him, surprise and something like pride flickering in her gaze. Zach, no, this is not your fight. But Zach shook his head, his jaw set. It became my fight the moment they stepped into my workshop, the moment they threatened you. Zorgoth's eyes narrowed, his gaze flicking between them. A human. You would ally yourself with this weak, fleshy creature. Syra's smile was fierce, her eyes never leaving Zorgoth. You underestimate him, Zorgoth, just as you underestimate me. That will be your downfall. And with that, she leaped forward, the heart blazing in her hands. Zach moved with her, his mind racing as he tried to remember every scrap of self-defense he'd ever learned. The workshop erupted into chaos, the clash of weapons and the crackle of energy filling the air. Zyra moved like a whirlwind, the heart an extension of her will as she parried and struck with lightning speed. Zach, for his part, did his best to stay out of her way, using his knowledge of the workshop's layout to his advantage. He ducked behind workbenches, lobbed tools at their attackers, anything to distract and disorient. But Zorgoth's warriors were relentless, their weapons carving swaths of destruction through the workshop. Sparks flew as equipment shattered, the acrid scent of burning electronics filling the air. In the heart of the melee, Xyra and Zorgoth clashed, the heart and Zorgoth's blade meeting in a blinding flash of light. They moved almost too fast to follow, a deadly dance of skill and will. Zach saw his chance, a discarded weapon lying amidst the debris. He lunged for it, his fingers closing around the hilt just as one of Zorgoth's warriors bore down on him. The weapon hummed to life in his grip, energy coursing through him. He swung it clumsily, more by instinct than skill, and was rewarded with a searing bolt of light that struck the warrior square in the chest, sending him flying back. Zach stared at the weapon in his hand, a thrill of exhilaration and terror racing through him. But there was no time to dwell on it, no time for fear. He turned, ready to rejoin the fight, only to see Xyra standing victorious, the heart pulsing in her grip. At her feet lay Zorgoth, his weapon shattered, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the crackle of sparking wires and the heaving of their breath. Then Xyra turned to him, her eyes alight with the fire of battle. "Zach, you fought with honor, with courage. I thank you." Zach shook his head, a shaky laugh escaping him. "I didn't do much. You were incredible." Xyra smiled then, a real smile, warm and filled with gratitude. "You stood by me, Zach. That means more than you know." She looked around at the ruins of the workshop, at the scorch marks and shattered equipment. "I'm sorry about your workshop. I never meant for this to happen." Zach followed her gaze, a lump forming in his throat. His workshop, his life's work. It lay in ruins around them. But as he looked at Xyra, at the heart glowing in her hands, he knew he would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. "It's just stuff," he said softly. "It can be replaced. What matters is that we're alive, that the heart is safe." Idra, her hand coming to rest on his shoulder. "And it's all thanks to you, Zach. Your skill, your courage. I won't forget it." As they stood there amidst the wreckage, the first stars winking to life in the sky above, Zach felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He had been tested in ways he had never imagined, and he had not been found wanting. Whatever came next, whatever trials lay ahead, he knew he would face them with Xyra by his side, united in purpose and in friendship. The legacy of the Kairos, the fight for what was right. It was his fight now, too, and he was ready for it. In the aftermath of the battle, Zach and Xyra stood amidst the ruins of the workshop, the weight of what had transpired heavy on their shoulders. The heart of Kairos pulsed softly in Xyra's hands, its glow a beacon in the gathering darkness. "They will be back," Xyra said softly, her gaze distant. "Zorgoth was just the beginning. Others will come for the heart, for the power it represents." Zach nodded, a grim determination settling over him. "Then we'll be ready for them." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to fortify the workshop. Zach used every scrap of knowledge he had, every bit of ingenuity he could muster. He reinforced the walls with layers of scavenged metal, rigged traps and defenses from the remnants of his equipment. Xyra, for her part, trained him in the ways of combat. She taught him how to wield the energy weapons they had salvaged, how to move and strike with efficiency and precision. It was grueling, exhausting work, but Zach threw himself into it with a fervor born of necessity. And all the while, the heart rested in a place of honor, a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. When the attack came, it was with a fury that shook the very foundations of the workshop. Zorgoth's kin descended upon them like a swarm, their weapons blazing, their eyes filled with a hunger for vengeance. But Zach and Xyra were ready. They fought side by side, a seamless unit, their movements synchronized as if they had been training together for years. The traps Zach had laid took their toll, energy beams, and shrapnel scything through the attackers' ranks. And at the heart of it all, the heart itself, its power surging through Xyra like a living thing. She was a force of nature, unstoppable, the embodiment of her people's legacy. But even with all their preparation, all their skill, the tide began to turn against them. The attackers were relentless, seemingly endless in number. For every one that fell, two more seemed to take their place. The workshop groaned under the onslaught, walls crumbling, equipment shattering. Zach and Sarah found themselves pushed back, step by step, until they stood with their backs to the heart, their last bastion. Zach's mind raced, desperation clawing at his thoughts. There had to be something, some way out, some trick he hadn't tried. His gaze fell on the plasma forge, still glowing with the heat of his last project. An idea formed, reckless, desperate. He turned to Xyra, his eyes meeting hers. "Do you trust me?" She nodded without hesitation. "With my life." Zach took a deep breath, then sprinted for the forge, dodging energy beams and flying debris. He reached it, his hands flying over the controls, inputting a sequence he had only ever theorized. The forge pulsed, its glow intensifying, turning blinding. Zach grabbed Xyra, pulling her close, shielding her with his body. The world went white. A roar filled the air, deafening, all-consuming. The workshop shook, the very air seeming to vibrate with the force of the explosion. And then, silence. Zach opened his eyes, blinking away the afterimages. The workshop was a ruin, smoke curling from the twisted remains of equipment. But of their attackers, there was no sign. Xyra stirred in his arms, her eyes wide. "Zach, what did you do?" He managed a shaky laugh, relief and disbelief warring within him. "I overloaded the forge, created a feedback pulse. I wasn't sure it would work." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. It was a sound of pure joy, of triumph against all odds. "You brilliant, crazy human. You saved us." Zach joined in her laughter, the adrenaline still thrumming through his veins. They had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. But as the laughter faded, as they looked around at the ruins of his life's work, the reality of their situation settled upon them. The workshop was gone, reduced to rubble and scrap, and with it, Zach knew, a part of himself. This place had been his home, his heart, for so long. To see it destroyed, even in the name of something greater, it was a loss he could scarcely comprehend. Xyra's hand found his, her grip warm and strong. "I'm sorry, Zach. I brought this upon you. Your home, your work. It's all gone because of me." But Zach shook his head, a fierce conviction rising within him. "No, Xyra. It's gone because of what we fought for, because of the choice I made. And I would make it again." He looked at her, at the heart glowing softly in her other hand. And he knew, with a certainty that went beyond words, that this was where he was meant to be. This fight, this purpose, it was a part of him now, as surely as the forge and the workshop had ever been. "We'll rebuild," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "Not just the workshop, but everything. Your people's legacy, the fight against those who would destroy it. We'll build a future from the ashes." Xyra's smile was soft, filled with a warmth that soothed his battered heart. "Together," she agreed. And as they stood there, hand in hand amidst the ruins, Zach knew that a new chapter of his life had begun. One filled with purpose, with promise, and with hope. The sun rose over the ruins of the workshop, its light casting long shadows across the shattered remnants of Zach's life's work. He stood amidst the debris, his heart heavy with the weight of what had been lost. Beside him, Xyra was a silent presence, her hand resting on the heart of Kairos. She had not left his side since the battle, her presence a constant comfort in the face of such devastation. "I never meant for this to happen," she said softly, her voice laced with regret. "Your home, your work, it's all gone because of me." Zach turned to her, his eyes fierce with conviction. No, Kyra. It's gone because we stood for something, because we fought for what was right. He gestured to the ruins around them, his voice firm. This is just stuff. Metal and wires and tools. But what we did here, what we fought for, that's something more. Something worth any sacrifice. Kyra's eyes shone with emotion, her grip tightening on the heart. You've given so much, Zach. More than I could ever have asked for. Your skill, your courage, your friendship. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. But I cannot ask you to give more. My fight, my path. It's one of constant danger, constant upheaval. I cannot drag you further into it. Zach's heart clenched, a sudden fear gripping him. The thought of Kyra leaving, of facing the future without her, it was like a physical blow. Kyra. No. We're in this together. We've come too far, fought too hard to walk away now. But Kyra was already shaking her head, a sad smile on her face. You have a life here, Zach. A future. I cannot ask you to abandon that for a battle that is not yours. She lifted the heart, its glow pulsing softly. This is my burden to bear, my legacy to uphold. And I must do it alone. Zach's mind raced, desperate for the words that would make her stay. But deep down, he knew she was right. Her path was one of war, of constant strife. And as much as it tore at his heart, he knew he could not follow her down it. Not yet. He reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on the heart. Then go, he said softly. Do what you must, but know that you don't fight alone. Not anymore. He gestured to the workshop, to the ruins that had once been his life. I will rebuild this. I will make it a beacon, a haven for those who fight for what's right. And when you need me, when you need a place to rest, to heal, to reforge your strength, I will be here. Kyra's eyes glistened, her smile tremulous, but filled with warmth. Zach, I don't know what to say. Zach smiled, even as his heart ached. Say you'll come back. Say that this isn't goodbye, but a new beginning. Kyra nodded, her hand squeezing his. A new beginning, she echoed. I like the sound of that. She stepped back, the heart glowing brightly in her hands. Until we meet again, Zach of Earth, until our paths cross once more. And with that, she was gone, a streak of light across the morning sky. Zach watched her go, his heart filled with a bittersweet mix of loss and hope. Then he turned, facing the ruins of his workshop with a new determination. He had work to do, a promise to keep. In the days and weeks that followed, Zach threw himself into the rebuilding. He salvaged what he could, repurposed what he couldn't. Slowly, painstakingly, the workshop began to take shape once more. But it was different now, changed by the experiences he had undergone. The tools and machines he built were not just for crafting and repair, but for defense, for war. The walls he raised were not just to keep out the elements, but to provide sanctuary to those who needed it. And always, at the heart of it all, was the memory of Kyra, the alien warrior who had changed his life, who had shown him a purpose beyond himself. He knew she was out there, fighting her never-ending battle. But he also knew, with a certainty that went beyond words, that she would return, that their paths would cross again, in this life or the next. And until then, he would be ready to support her, to fight beside her, to build the future they had dreamed of. A future of hope, of unity, of a galaxy where the legacy of the Keros and the courage of all those who fought for what was right would endure forever. Years passed, and Zach's workshop grew. No longer just a place of crafting and repair, it became a hub, a nexus for those who fought against the darkness. Warriors, freedom fighters, rebels from a dozen worlds, all found their way to his door, drawn by whispers of the man who had stood with Kyra of the Keros, who had helped reforge the legendary heart. Zach welcomed them all, offering his skills, his knowledge, his unwavering support. He repaired their weapons, fortified their ships, devised strategies and technologies to aid their cause. His name, once known only within the confines of his small world, now spread across the stars, spoken in tones of reverence and awe. But always at the back of his mind was Kyra. The years had not dimmed her memory, nor lessened the ache of her absence. He thought of her often, wondering where her battles had taken her, whether she was safe, whether she ever thought of him. He had long since come to terms with his feelings for her, with the depth of the bond they had forged in those fateful days. She was more than a friend, more than an ally. She was a part of him, as integral as his heart or his mind. And so, when the day came that a strange ship appeared in the skies above his world, he knew, with a certainty that defied explanation, that it was her. He stood outside his workshop, watching as the ship descended, his heart pounding in his chest. It was larger than he remembered, sleeker, more advanced. But the symbol emblazoned on its side was unmistakable. The crest of the Keros, the symbol of the heart. The ship landed, and the hatch opened, and there she was, striding down the ramp, the heart of Keros glowing at her side. She looked different, older, her face bearing the scars of countless battles. But her eyes, those fierce, brilliant eyes, were the same. "Zach," she said, and her voice was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. He stepped forward, his own voice rough with emotion. "Zyra, you came back." She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. "I made a promise, didn't I? A new beginning." She gestured to the ship, to the warriors emerging behind her. They were of all races, all creeds, united under the banner of the Keros. "The fight is not over, Zach. It may never be over. But we are turning the tide. The heart has guided us to allies, to victories we never thought possible." She held out her hand, the gesture and echo of that fateful night so long ago. "And it has guided me back to you, back to where it all began." Zach took her hand, marveling at the rightness of it, the perfect fit of her fingers against his. "I never doubted it would." He looked to the warriors, to the symbols of a dozen worlds stitched onto their uniforms. "The workshop is yours, for as long as you need it, for as long as the fight continues." Ira squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. "I was hoping you'd say that, because the fight needs you, Zach. The galaxy needs you, not just your skills, but your heart, your courage. The same qualities that made me believe in you all those years ago." Zach's heart swelled, a sense of purpose, of destiny, filling him. This was what he had been working towards all these long years. This was the future he had dreamed of. "Then let's get to work," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "Let's show the galaxy what the legacy of the Keros and the spirit of humanity can do when they stand together." And with that, they turned, hand in hand, and walked into the workshop, into the future, into legend. For this was the legacy of Zach and Zyra, of the heart of Keros, and the unbreakable spirit of those who fought for what was right. A legacy that would endure, that would inspire, for generations to come. A legacy of hope, of unity, of the indomitable will of all those who dared to dream of a better tomorrow. A legacy of legends rising to meet their destiny among the stars.